We're all familiar with the typical risk management processes. The fundamental notion is that we identify risks, we assess their probability of occurrence, and we assess the consequences of the occurrence. Then we put a risk management plan in place that is designed to eliminate or alleviate the impact of the serious risk events. Every risk is necessarily a future event, and only when the risk event actually happens is the risk transferred into a problem. The better we are at identifying risk and understanding the underlying basis of our risks, the better we are at managing those risks. Risk analysis provides basic input for continuity and recovery strategies, plans, and responses. This slide depicts risk analysis as building upon the business impact analysis within a Stage 1 undertaking, leading to a controlled and refined business continuity management strategy, culture, and organization, typifying a highly mature organization. Risk refers to the uncertainty that surrounds future events and outcomes. It is the expression of the likelihood and the impact of an event with the potential to influence the achievement of an organization's objectives. The definitive guide for risk management is now ISO 31000, released in 2009. It is intended to be a family of standards relating to risk management codified by the International Organization for Standardization. The purpose of ISO 31000-2009 is to provide principles and generic guidelines on risk management. ISO 31000 describes a risk management process as depicted in this slide. One of the key elements and a precursor to creating a risk profile are the principles governing the organization's boundaries in approaching risk management. An organization's approach to these principles needs to be agreed and defined within risk management policies, a process guide, plans, risk registers, and issue logs. An organization's risk profile identifies key risk areas that cut across the organization's functions, programs, systems, as well as individual events, activities, or projects that could significantly influence the overall management priorities, performance, and realization of organizational objectives. Factors relevant to the development of an organization's risk profile include the overall management framework, governance and accountability structures, values and ethics, operational work environment, the current risk tolerance of various stakeholders, individual and corporate risk management culture and tolerances, existing risk management expertise and practices, human resource capacity, level of transparency required, and local and corporate policies, procedures, and processes. Communication and stakeholder consultations are key supporting processes for risk management. Key things to remember in creating a communication and consultation channels include imbuing a culture in which everyone is a risk manager, placing responsibility for driving risk management high in the organization. Open communication is necessary for risk management to succeed. Without open communications, risk management cannot be everybody's business. Managers require direct communication channels up, down, and across their business units to help identify risks and take appropriate actions. Information must be shared. Informal and formal teams are a mechanism that many organizations use to manage risks. Teams bring together various risk attitudes and bring fresh thinking to issues and solutions. They also focus diverse disciplines on common objectives. A handful of organizations report to management and stakeholders on risks and risk management performance. These reports might concentrate on the unit's top 10 risks and how they are managed. ISO 31000 directs the organization to define the context in which risk management will operate. This involves the identification of risk in a selected domain of interest, planning the remainder of the process, mapping out the social scope of risk management, the identity and objectives of stakeholders, and the basis upon which risks and constraints will be evaluated, defining a framework for the activity and an agenda for identification, developing an analysis of risk involved in the process, and the mitigation or solution of risk using available technological, human, and organizational resources. An important contextual element is the risk register. The objective of risk registration is to display the profiled risk in a structured format. A table can be used to facilitate the assessment and analysis, and by considering the consequences and probability of each of the risks set out in the table, it should be possible to prioritize the key risks that need to be analyzed in more detail. Identification of the risks associated with business activities and decision-making process associated with them may be categorized as strategic, project tactical, operational, etc. The elements that are contained within a risk registry typically include the scope of the risk, that's a qualitative description of the events, their size, type, number, and dependencies, the nature of the risk, such as strategic, operational, financial, knowledge, or compliance, the stakeholders and their expectations, the organization's risk appetite, the loss potential and financial impact of risk, the value of the risk, the probability and size of potential losses and gains, objectives for control of the risk, and desired levels of performance. Risk treatment and control mechanisms, primary means by which the risk is currently managed, the levels of confidence in existing control, and the identification of protocols for monitoring and review. The potential action for improvement, recommendations that are intended to reduce the risk. And lastly, strategic and policy developments, the identification of functions responsible for developing strategy and policies around the risk. The central processes in ISO 31000 deal with the assessment of the risk, threat, or opportunity. Risks must be assessed as to their potential severity of loss and for their probability of occurrence. These qualities can be either simple to measure in the case of the value of a lost building, or impossible to know for sure in the case of the probability of an unlikely event occurring. Therefore, in the assessment process, it's critical to make the best educated guesses possible in order to properly prioritize the implementation in a risk management plan. The fundamental difficulty in risk assessment is determining the rate of occurrence, since statistical information is not available on all kinds of past incidents. Furthermore, evaluating the severity of the consequences, that's the impact, is often quite difficult for immaterial assets. Risks are about events that, when triggered, cause problems. Hence, risk identification can start with the source of problems or with the problem itself. Source analysis inspects the sources of risk. They may be internal or external to the system that is the target of the risk management. Examples include project stakeholders, company employees, or the weather over an airport. With the central focus on problems, risks are matched with the identified threats. For example, the threat of losing money, the threat of abuse of privacy information, or the threat of accidents and casualties. The threats are associated with entities such as shareholders, customers, and government bodies. There are a number of identification methods commonly used. With objective-based risk identification, the